What's going on, everybody? Lucas Wenzel back again for Fantasy Pros. Welcome into the channel. Today we're going to be talking about 10 players on the waiver wire I am looking to stash ahead of this weekend slate and ahead of next week's waivers as well. But before we dive into any of that, if you want your chance at winning a signed Joe Mixon Cincinnati Bengals jersey, courtesy of our friends over at Pristine Auction, you need to subscribe to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel right now and comment below on this video. That is it. That is all you need to do. We will be announcing a winner right here on the channel, so make sure to turn on those notifications so you can be alerted when new episodes are up and to claim your prize when we announce it. Alright, let's start with a running back who saw quite a few opportunities last week and could this week as well. Caleb Huntley, running back for the Atlanta Falcons, is rostered in only 13% of leagues. Huntley saw most, if not all, of his work after Cordero Patterson left the game last week. But with the 12 snaps he did see, the Falcons gave him the ball 10 times. He made the most of those 10 carries by averaging 5.6 yards per tote and found pay dirt as well. This backfield will likely be a 2 to 3 headed monster going forward, but if this team is going to give Huntley the valuable work inside of the 10-yard line, there's always opportunities for scores, and we all know how those can salvage a fantasy day. I want to talk about Wan'Dale more next, because even though he didn't perform in his season debut and gets a tough matchup with the Eagles this week, he's still worth stashing now instead of later. The Cardinals didn't limit Wan'Dale whatsoever last week, as he saw 87% of the snaps in his first game back. As a result, Greg Dortch's snaps absolutely plummeted back down to 36%. That shows us that the Cardinals have inserted Wan'Dale back into their offense as the primary slot wide receiver. Let's not forget that Rondale Moore was a highly regarded prospect coming out of college as well. A 4.37 40-yard dash, 93rd percentile agility score, and 97th percentile burst score. The matchups coming up after Philadelphia look decent as well. He gets Seattle, New Orleans, Minnesota, Seattle again, and then the Rams. All those teams outside of Seattle are top 12 in allowing the most fantasy points to wide receivers this year. As long as DeAndre Hopkins is out, and even as Hopkins works back into this offense, Rondale Moore could be a sneaky plug-and-play should the Cardinals choose to keep him involved. This next player may not be the lead running back in his offense right now, but Rachaad White could continue to see more opportunities as the season goes on. He saw a season-high 38% of the snaps last week, and even got an entire offensive series to himself. He capitalized on it and found the end zone. White also scored double-digit fantasy points on receiving work alone. 5 targets, 5 receptions, 50 yards. It doesn't get much more clean than that. It's tough to tell what will stick for the Buccaneers going forward, especially since they ran the ball only 6 times against the Chiefs. White is one of those guys with immense upside, and should anything happen to Leonard Fournette, I certainly don't wish that, White becomes an immediate plug-and-play into fantasy lineups. White said earlier this week that he sees himself and Fournette as a 1-2 punch, and maybe the Bucs will going forward as well. This wide receiver has been working back from a knee injury since week 1, and now is the time to stash Wan'Dale Robinson, who's rostered in only 5% of leagues. This Giants team has stumbled its way to a 3-1 record on the back of Saquon Barkley and favorable matchups thus far. This is a team whose top pass-catching option last week was tight end Daniel Bellinger. The Giants need wide receiver help desperately, and Wan'Dale has logged limited practices this week. He may not suit up and be ready to go for week 5, but when Darius Slayton, Richie James, and David Stills all only had 1 reception last week, the Giants need to get their talented, high draft capital wide receivers back on the field. It may not be pretty from the get-go, but this Giants defense isn't exactly stellar, and this offense will likely get into some pass-heavy game script going forward, especially against Green Bay and Baltimore the next 2 weeks. Next, we have Devontae Parker, wide receiver for the New England Patriots, who's rostered in 29% of leagues. He's now seen back-to-back double-digit fantasy point games, albeit saved by a touchdown last week. The crazy thing about Devontae Parker, though, is that he's seen at least 97% of the team snaps in 3 out of 4 games this year, yet he's seen more than 2 targets in a game once this year. However, he's the clear deep threat for this team. He's 12th in deep targets and 13th in average depth of target. He's 6th in yards per target, and he's averaging 23 yards per reception, which is first amongst wide receivers. I'm intrigued by his matchups coming up through week 12 as well. He gets Detroit this week, then Cleveland, Chicago, the Jets, Colts, Jets again, and then Minnesota. The Patriots should get Mac Jones back soon as well. He's been limited in practice this week, but that should boost the value of Devontae Parker again once he's back. Do you know who the tight end 10 is on the season right now? It's Will Dissly of the Seattle Seahawks, and he's rostered in only 10% of leagues. There's nothing flashy about Will Dissly at all whatsoever, but he scored in 3 out of 4 games this year and has 3 receptions on 3 red zone targets, which is actually 10th at the position. If you think Will Dissly is solely being used around the goal line, that's actually not true. Dissly is currently 9th in yards per route run and 2nd in yards per target. He gets favorable matchups with Arizona, Tampa, and Las Vegas for the next 7 weeks as well, so as long as Will Dissly is catching touchdowns, he should be stashed on your team. We've seen a lot of rookie wide receivers show out this year, but this one is coming onto the scene a bit more slowly. Sky Moore of the Kansas City Chiefs is rostered in only 6% of leagues despite playing his highest snap count of the year this past week against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Moore has averaged a whopping 2.77 yards per route run, which is 8th amongst wide receivers this year. For context, fellow wide receivers Juju Smith-Schuster and Marquez Valdes-Scantling are running 1.79 yards and 1.27 yards respectively. Not even Travis Kelce is hitting that mark at 2.27 yards per route run. We've seen this wide receiver group in Kansas City underwhelm so far in 2022, so we shouldn't put it past Andy Reid to get Sky Moore more involved in this offense in the coming weeks, especially with his great route running thus far. Let's talk about another Kansas City Chiefs player next. Running back Isaiah Pacheco continues to see opportunity in one of the best offenses in the NFL. When given the opportunities, Pacheco has taken advantage. He had 11 carries for 63 yards in week 4, averaging 5.7 yards per carry. His snap count isn't where you want it to be, as he's been outsnapped by both Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Jerick McKinnon in every game this year. However, he's 14th in both true yards per carry and breakaway run rate. We're getting these flashes from Pacheco, and should anything happen to Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Pacheco immediately becomes a potential league winner. Plus, having pieces of this Kansas City offense is never really a bad idea in and of itself. With Treylon Burks sidelined for the foreseeable future, Nick Westbrook-Ikhine is worth a stash. He hasn't done a whole lot up to this point, but has seen at least 60% of the snaps in every game this year, and that should go up without Treylon Burks. Robert Woods is a nice wide receiver, but he's not exactly an alpha wide receiver that will soak up any vacated targets in the meantime. Ryan Tannehill will likely spread the ball around more, and we saw Westbrook-Ikhine produce in a handful of games last year without A.J. Brown. You also have to love his matchup this week against the Washington Commanders, who have allowed the 3rd most fantasy points, 3rd most receiving yards, and the most touchdowns to wide receivers this year. Lastly, let's get this elite first-round rookie wide receiver on your roster now while he's still available. Jameson Williams of the Detroit Lions is available in nearly 70% of leagues still. We're going to stash him now because he could be back on the field in late October. So instead of battling your league's waiver priority or paying premium fab later, he'll already be on your roster. If it weren't for his ACL injury, Jameson Williams would have likely been the first wide receiver taken in the 2022 NFL Draft, posting over 1,500 receiving yards and 15 touchdowns on 79 receptions his senior year of college. Believe it or not, the Lions are currently the #1 offense in the NFL, and once they get their elite rookie burner back healthy on the field alongside Amon-Ra St. Brown, watch out. The dude is an explosive play waiting to happen on a team that's producing fantasy points like crazy right now. That's a great situation for Jameson Williams to walk into for fantasy football. Alright y'all, before I get out of here, remember, if you want your chance at winning a signed Joe Mixon Cincinnati Bengals jersey, courtesy of our friends over at Pristine Auction, you need to subscribe to the FantasyPros YouTube channel right now and comment below on this video. Maybe you agreed with something I said, maybe you 100% disagree, but that's it. That is all you need to do. We will be announcing a winner right here on the channel, so make sure to turn on those notifications so you can be alerted when new episodes are up and to claim your prize when we announce it.
Thanks for tuning in to the FantasyPros YouTube channel. Don't forget to check out our featured videos, and while you're at it, make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at FantasyPros, so you can get the latest news and updates to give you the edge you need in your fantasy league.